So great success with our plants if we get them pollinated, and then that leads to fertilization, and then we can move those seeds around. Remember, wind, water, primarily are abiotic factors. But we see here is the bee that we all know and love. Think about, the honey they produce, which I love honey, especially on peanut butter sandwich. But, and one of the things, you probably heard about recently is the bee colony collapsing around the world. And I think California might have something to do with that, because in February, just last 2 months ago, I guess now, the almond harvest in California is so giant. They need so many bees. Beekeepers from all over the country send their bees here to California. They all kind of mingle and are together in the Central Valley of California for a period of 2-3 weeks. At which time, you can think of, if humans all the country get together and mingle, there's some diseases going to be spreading. So probably whatever's happening, if there is a disease component, it's probably being exacerbated by the California almond harvest. And why would honeybee people that keep bees, beekeepers, put their bees at risk? Probably because it's so darn lucrative to bring your bees. I mean, talk about get a few $1 million potentially to bring your bees here. Probably going to do it. So yeah, pollination, we get the pollen is exchanged from one flower to another. But not just that, you got to have more than pollination. You have the fertilization, where the pollen grows down through a tube and then combines with the egg, and then you get a fruit, and then you can get those seeds dispersed. So let's take a closer look. We just have the pollination. You get that pollen grain on the stigma of a flower. If you look at the very center of the flower, you see a little sticky piece, a little nub. That's where that pollen's going to go. So that pollen grain lands on that sticky stigma. So the male gamete then needs to travel down that tube right here. Woo! So that's the pollen's got to go down a tube, and it grows its own tube. It's really interesting. Not tubule. So the pollen needs, and we see that here, they're all kind of growing their way down. They all want it, and they all have to have their own piece of pollen. See all these eggs here? This is the ovule. Let me just redo that. They all have, like, for example, corn. You've all eaten a cob of corn. At least I hope you have. My favorite foods. A cob of corn, every single little piece of corn you eat was from an individual piece of pollen that grew down a tube. When you shuck a piece of head of corn, you'll see all of those strings, the silk. Those are all pollen tubes. Okay, so pollen tubes. I'm gonna put silk from. You've all eaten corn, so you've all have familiarity, I think, with pollen tubes. You have that male gamete fusing with the female gamete, fertilization, and these ovules then develop into seeds right here, and the ovary itself develops into a fruit. And that's why you see a lot of fruits, multiple seeds, right? It won't usually be just one seed in a fruit. There'll be many. And then you want to disperse them. Why do you want to get rid of them, move them around? Well, for one thing, you got the parent plant there already. It's probably doing pretty well. It's probably pretty big, and it's going to block the sun and resources for the new offspring. So you want to reduce that competition between the parent and the offspring. And it spreads the species to other places. And this is how plants can move, okay? A plant can't just get up and move like there's something goes wrong. Oh, it's too hot here. It's too cold, too dry, too wet. That individual plant can't get up and walk around. But it can send its seeds somewhere else, right? Which is essentially like moving. Have a great exercise on how forests have been kind of moving around in the East Coast because of climate change. When the environment changes, plants need to adjust and move around, and there's a lot of evidence for that, but especially with these eastern forests, you can see them moving around. There are a lot of different methods of dispersal, right? My favorite things, I remember maple, I think it's right, maple seeds on a maple leaf act like a little helicopter when they fall down. I remember being a kid, just being how fascinating how that works. At the Huntington, we'll see they have a whole display about that. Hooks to catch on animals. You'll see if you have a dog, they run through brush, there'll be things sticking to them. Your socks will pick up a lot of seeds. And then fleshy, fruity, and delicious, sweet, so animals want to eat. Maybe even eat the seeds and then poop them out, and then you got all that nice nutrients. Finish. That's the ovary. Okay. So this is what's called a mutualistic relationship, and that means both benefit. Okay, both benefit from the relationship. The animal gets some good food, and the plant gets that pollination. So pollination is only when you have that. Only when you have it go from one plant to another. Okay. Well, it's self-pollinate, so that's still called pollination. Sorry. When you have pollen going from the anther to the stigma. The anther is that little piece on top of the filament on the male part of the flower where the pollen rests. So you can have self-pollination, but again, plants want to avoid that. Always more beneficial to have sexual reproduction. And here we talked about this before. Water, wind, but most often through an animal. It's just more efficient. With all the insects that are out there and the nutrition they demand, over time, plants have evolved to utilize that. It's a workforce, essentially. It's a resource plants can use. So plants are using us. It always seems like we use the plants, we cut them down, this and that, but plants actually use us. And when you have, say, for example, a big grassland that gets eaten by, say, zebra or antelope, that grassland is healthier from the animals eating it because it helps to move nutrients around the ecosystem, helps to clear out land so new plants can grow. So you just don't have the old crusty individuals. You need some amount of environmental disruption is usually helpful for most ecosystems. Forests are another thing, right? Periodic fires are healthy for most forests. Clear out the old stuff, give room for the new stuff. The problem now is the fires are just too big and destroy everything. From man-made climate change. I love this picture, this close-up of the bee. You guys been stung by a bee before? I've been stung like 3, 4, 5 times. I kind of made it a habit when I was a kid. Okay, so here's what we talked about earlier, our short and long day plants. It's all about differential exposure to light, right? Long day plants like that FR, that extra FR, gets them going. And the short day plants don't like that FR. That keeps them from flowering, so they need less of it. But chrysanthemums, short day plants, you can trick them to flower by using, black cloth, stick them over, or using a dark room. And tulips over here, you can use different light lengths to make them flower. Tulips, definitely, I think, one of the most beautiful flowers. If you look at the tulip, really spurred, if you love history, spurred all sorts of trade in Europe in the 17th century. Is a huge explosion worldwide. People wanted their tulips. So here are seeds, and these are two different kinds. Over here you'll see this is a dicot, and any kind of bean like the mung bean that we have been using a lot, or the radish. Those are the two plants that we use a lot. And corn seed is a monocot. And your common monocots would be like grasses, palm trees, corn, of course, onions. And you'll see, if you look at all those, they kind of have their leaves, they kind of have a straight parallel veins on them. And then dicots usually have branching veins. Those would be like cinnamon, avocado, pepper, mung beans, radishes. So the whole thing here is called your embryo. And this part on the inside, it's basically the starchy stuff. That's called the endosperm. And that's the starchy part of the corn. You know, that's the energy that the corn would like to use, right? Until we eat it. Then we have the epicotyl and hypocal. These are the first parts that come out of the plant when you first plant it. This is the radicle, the very end. Like when you first see those mung beans pop up, you're seeing the radicle, hypocotyl, and epicotyl. And you'll notice here, these are how you know basically if you grow dicots, you'll see two leaves. These are called cotyledons. What you got here, there'll be two cotyledons, and that's where dicot and monocot comes from. And here you'll have one leaf when it first grows. So on the next page, I want you to go ahead and create a label diagram. See, kind of like me right there. You got a monocot, or no, dicot. And then I want you to do your corn. Ooh, but you're gonna do better. You have a lot more art training than I ever had. So draw that, label it up. All right, I need you to do that on your own. And here we got animal pollinated flower cut lengthwise. All right, so over here, these would be the male parts, which are called the stamen. So you have the anther, and as it says, contains the pollen. So that's where it's going to rub up against the bee or the bird, and then hopefully get transferred to another flower of the same species. And this is called the filament. And every plant just has a different design for these, so that they can use different insects. If everybody used the same insect, that would be a big problem. Same thing if all plants flowered at the same time. You gotta space things out. Early spring, winter, late winter, early spring, mid-spring, late spring, early summer, mid-summer. If you do that, then you can use that workforce, that animal insect pollinating workforce, more effectively. And then changing up the shape, you can use different kinds of animals, different kinds of insects, different kinds of birds to accomplish that. Down here it almost looks like a petal. It's called the sepal. Kind of sounds like petal, right? And then you have the female part, the ovary, right? Where you have the ovules. Okay, these are the female parts buried in here, and then these are the male parts up there. Oh, I got my symbols wrong. Man, I get confused on that stuff all the time. There we go. The ovary, and then here we have the stigma. And it's called the style, where the pollen, remember the pollen needs to land here, and then grow a tube all the way down to one of the ovules in there, the eggs. Oh yeah, you can see them right here. One thing that's kind of sick in plants is that in most cases, one of those ovules will eat another, so it will cannibalize the other egg. That's pretty wild. That would be like if human twins, if one twin kind of ate the other one. Maybe that happens. I don't think so. But that's what goes on in plants. They're different. They got a lot of interesting life strategies happening as you can eating your fellow like brother or sister in the ovary that's pretty interesting. And as of course, the thing we're all really attracted with flowers are the petals, right? Different colors, different shapes, different designs, and that's what Huntington Gardens. Man, I hope you checked out the orchids in the conservatory and all the other flowers you're going to see everywhere. It should be an amazing time. March and April usually pretty good for flowers. April probably the best. So, on the next page, oh yeah, draw that yourself. Draw that. Why, whenever I draw it seems like I've seen or something. Remember this? I'm trying to draw the ovary, right? Here. That's the stigma. There we go. That's better. And then you're going to have, the filaments. You draw a petal. Draw a little bit better. The sepals. Oh, that's kind of cool. Hey, that's... Ha-ha! That was kind of artistic. Dang. All right. The last thing I need you to do for plants, I need you to design an experiment, just like you did with your IA, but not a big deal. What could you test? Now, one student in this class did try testing burning the, heat treating the seeds. So one thing we need to know to germinate, you need oxygen, because you need to start using the sugars, the carbohydrates stored in that seed to begin building the tissues and growing. You need water to activate those cells. It turns on gibberellin, and then gibberellin kind of gets that process going. And of course, plants have an ideal temperature. Usually for seed growing, they want you to use a little kind of a warming pad to keep it nice and warm. So, you also, plants deal with fires, light or darkness, being covered or blocked by other trees, getting cold in the wintertime. That can kill, where I grew up, big apple, cherry, pear producers, and they would be really freaked out in the spring because you have the buds, you have, the flower starting, but then you might have freezing temperatures, some wacky freezing conditions, and that can kill the flower, which it kills the fruit. It won't grow if it gets frozen. So they would put these pots out in the orchards and heat them up like heaters, outdoor heaters, called smudge pots. Or they would turn on wind machines to blow the air around to help circulate more warm air. Or, get this, they would spray water on the trees. And why does that work? You think that would be worse because it'd freeze it, but no. When water freezes, that freezing process, heat of fusion, is exothermic, so it releases a little bit of heat and keeps them from freezing. It's really wild, but it's true. So what I need you to do is, take 10-15 minutes and just kind of design an experiment. What kind of variable could you manipulate? How many trials would you do? And just kind of state a research question, okay, for 18. All right, thank you. That is all for plants.